In today's episode, I talk about using pens for technical drawing, storing ink in your bathroom, and my recommended strategy for pen collecting. Hey everybody, it's Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, and it's episode number 141 of Goulet Q&A. You may hear a little bit of noise in the background. I'm not sure how much you can hear it. There's some construction going on outside. They're redoing our parking lot out there. So if you hear some noises going, just be aware that that's what that is. And if I get distracted a little bit, sometimes I get the squirrel, kind of thing going on. Not like the hail last week anyway. Hopefully that won't be going on. Though we are supposed to have a hurricane that's coming through this weekend anyway. So I know it's going to be affecting a lot of you folks on the East Coast. Hopefully it won't be too bad. Swing out to sea, maybe, we'll see. But I'm recording this on Wednesday. So as of right now, it hasn't hit this area anyway, though it is coming this weekend and already grocery stores are getting cleared out and all that kind of stuff. So gotta love this time of year. It's been a little bit lighter on the product launches this week, not as much going on there. We have had a few exciting things coming in. For one, the Lamy 2000 limited edition, which I believe by the time this video launches, we will have launched this on our site. So let me zoom in a little bit and just show you what's going on here. It's pretty cool, and originally I wasn't as excited about it because they had told us there was going to be no discounting whatsoever at $595, which is pretty high price. It's twice the price of the stainless steel one. But they changed that and said that we can do 20% off. So that's pretty cool. So there you go. So let me show you what this is all about. So that makes it $472, which is still a lot, but for you avid Lamy fans, I think you'll still want to consider it. Now they're only making 5,000 of these worldwide, which is really not that many. Cool box. The outer box is really cool. It comes in a cardboard sleeve on the outside too. It's got a nice imprint here with the kind of this shiny Lamy logo. That's pretty cool. Then you open up the box like this. It's got this little piece of foam. It's got a little polishing cloth here. And it's got a Lamy blue black ink, which is nice, instead of their normal black. And then here's the black amber. I chose the extra fine for myself. And I have number 1382 out of 5,000. So here's the pen. It's a little less bronzy looking, a little less gold in color, I guess. Whoops, zooming the wrong way. Than I was originally thinking. So that's from their pictures. It looks a little bit different. Sorry, this is a little insert thing that doesn't need to be on there. It has a shiny mirror clip, which is kind of cool. I believe it's palladium plated, and then it's got this black amber finish. So it's similar in style to the stainless steel Lamy 2000. So it's a little weightier. It does not have an ink window, unfortunately, but it does have the built-in piston, just like you would expect. Same nib as the Lamy 2000s. So performance-wise, expect that the pen is going to write the same as your normal Lamy 2000. It does post on the back. I do not know if if using it over time, if the cap is going to affect the finish at all. I believe it's a pretty durable finish, but that's something that I would have to see over time. It's not doing anything crazy as I'm using it here. The thing I will say about having handled this thing a little bit is that it leaves fingerprints. And I've got really oily fingers, so maybe mine's a little more drastic. That's why they give you a polishing cloth. So if you want the thing to look pristine, you're gonna have to polish it. And it's kind of a matte finish a little bit, so it takes a bit of polishing to get it really working well, and same with the clip. So it's gonna show some fingerprints. Me personally, that doesn't really bother me that much with pens in general, but if you are a stickler for that, be ready to be polishing this pen a lot. So that's what's going on there. Another cool pen that we have gotten is the Metropolitan Divina. This is from Visconti. It's only in the midi size, which is smaller. A couple of different colors. This is the gray one. And this is the same material. It's a celluloid material, same material as what we have in the Wall Street Metropolitan. So the Divina, it's a little higher price, but this pen is just so cool. I actually don't own a midi-sized Divina. I have a larger one, but this is one, it uses the smaller palladium nib, like you would see on the Homo sapiens midi, and like what's on the Wall Street too. And the cool thing about this pen, it's got some really cool design. I mean, of course, it's got the hook safe lock, which I just love, and it feels so smooth on the celluloid material here. The cool thing about this pen is that it is pentagonal, so it's faceted, 5 sides, and it twists in that facet, so it's incredibly difficult to manufacture in that way. It also has a slight taper to it, so it's a faceted, twisting, tapering design that has sterling silver inlays cut into the material. It's so amazingly complicated to manufacture that you don't even know. It's got the My Pen system in the top. It's got the Visconti spring clip on the top with the Ponte Vecchio, arch there. And then it's got, you can actually see inside. So as the piston is moving up and down, you can actually see it. So I think you'll be able to actually see, you'll be able to see the ink level in this. I'm not sure how much you'd be able to see it under bad lighting, but if you hold it up to the light, you'd be able to see it back and forth. So you can kind of see your ink level inside of here, which you cannot normally do with the Divina. So that is really a cool feature about the Wall Street material, celluloid, the Wall Street celluloid specifically. So it's really cool. So I recommend, if you have had your eye on a Divina anyway, and this one strikes your fancy, go for it. It's a little pricier, but I definitely recommend you check it out. And then a couple other things as far as new products go. Field Notes announced just this week, actually, that they are going to have their new seasonal notebook called Lunacy. So it's a lunar-themed notebook. It's pretty cool. They did a sweet video on it that you should check out. But we got those ordered and in, so we are selling those now, if everything has gone to plan. It's weird talking about something that's going to happen in the future as if it's already happened, like I have to do with these Q&As sometimes. But pretty cool notebooks there, so check those out. Also, we've recently heard about the TWSBI Eco in a lime green, which may or may not be your flavor. It's kind of a divisive color, but if that's of interest to you, we're going to have that later this month in October. And then we just found out about the TWSBI 580 all in pink, which is going to be coming mid-November. And I don't have a lot of details about that, but we should have them up on the site by this point, so you can sign up for an email notification list if you are curious and learning more about that. And that's pretty much what I've got going on at the moment. Things have been a little bit slower, but we got some cool stuff in the works. Also, just some like video-wise stuff that's going to be coming out fairly soon. We shot a video on the Aurora Optima that we'll have out soon. So that's a cool gold nib pen, really kind of feature-packed, and it's been doing pretty well. It's been pretty popular so far, so I'm going to have a video about that. I was just waiting for the extra fine nib to come in. And then the other thing that we have in the works is I did a Skype interview with Linda Shrewsbury from Cursive Logic. So Jenny is working on cutting that together, and probably in the next few weeks, we're kind of like leaning towards end of October, publishing that one out. So that should be pretty cool. And then we have another secret project in the works that I'm not going to share yet, but you'll be pretty excited about. So that you'll probably hear about in the next week or two. But anyway, I'll leave you in suspense on that one. Let's get into the questions, because I do have a bunch. I got 10 questions this week, and I'm going to try to power through them because I spent a lot of time talking about that Lummi 2000. All right, here we go. Starting out with pen and writing questions, which are kind of dominating the Q&A today. This is from bsecraw on YouTube. Sorry if I botched your name. Whenever I order from you guys, I get the Surprise Me ink sample that you offer. I think it's a nifty way to try new inks. The last time I received Diamine Blue Lightning, and while I'm intrigued by the idea behind shimmertastic inks, I had not planned on ordering any due to their reputed tendency to gunk up the feed in fountain pens. That, and I'm not a shimmertastic kind of guy. So now that I have the sample, I'm curious what relatively inexpensive pen has a feed that would be easiest to get the gunk out of once I tried the shimmertastic ink. Okay, I get where you're coming from. I'm not necessarily a shimmertastic individual myself, though I do like to use it every now and then. I get pretty exploratory when it comes to inks, but that's not necessarily something I'd go like bring it around to the whatever, you know, cigar club or something. I'm not a member of a cigar club, but I imagine if I was, I wouldn't be using Blue Lightning there. I will say that the Surprise Me ink samples are amazingly popular. It's actually our #1 selling product here at the Goulet Pen Company. Granted, it's pretty inexpensive, so that's why. But that sells better than any individual ink sample, or really any other product that we have is the Surprise Me ink sample. So you're not alone in liking to, you know, be adventurous and try new stuff. So that's pretty cool. Shimmertastic, you know, for me, it's not necessarily so much of an everyday ink. You know, I like to use it every now and then, but there's a lot of people out there that are using it. It's an amazingly popular brand or sub-brand or category of ink or whatever you want to call it. So I have heard some feedback that it can clog some pens. I think especially if it's drying out and not being used regularly. Certain types of pens, the feeds are more accommodating than others. You know, because it's like there's a particulate in there. You know, to get that glittery effect, there's a very fine particulate that is mixed in with the ink to get that shimmer. So that will, you know, work better in some pens than in others. Now, I haven't heard of any feedback about it like doing anything permanent to the pens. In fact, it cleans out pretty easily in terms of its functionability. Now, it can cling to certain feeds and stuff like that and take a while to visually be, you know, completely out of a pen, but, you know, it's the kind of thing that you know, it's nice to try out, but you don't want to go taking a shimmertastic ink and trying it in every single pen you have, because it's going to take a lot to clean it out, especially if it's a demonstrator pen and you're trying to get it to be completely perfect. So you know, you're asking about what pens to use. I would say that the easier the pen is to clean and disassemble, the better. So a couple of ones that I've had good experiences with, Jinhao, you know, they're pretty inexpensive pens, so it's not a huge investment. The feeds tend to be fairly open, so it doesn't cause a huge problem. And then to clean it out, you know, the nib and the feed is pretty easily removable, so that makes it really nice when you go to clean out something like a shimmertastic. So that one works pretty well. Pilot Metropolitan also. The fine nib tends to not flow quite as generously, so you know, I would recommend leaning more towards the medium. Plus, the broader the nib size, the more it's going to show off that shimmer feature anyway. I won't do it with this pen, but you can pull the nib and the feed out just like I did here. It's pretty easy to do so and set back in there. So also not a huge investment, pretty reliable writer. This one, it may dry up a little bit here and there on you, especially because the nib is finer, but I would say that would be a good one to try out. And then honestly, Lamy pens like a Safari, these are just pretty fail-safe. You can remove the nibs on them. The feed, I wouldn't go pulling the feed out of there, but it's really easy to flush, being a cartridge converter with a bulb syringe, and it cleans out pretty easily. So I've had pretty good luck with using that in you know, the shimmertastics in those. So, you know, I wouldn't recommend that you have to go buying a whole pen just for like one sample that you're looking to try, but if you have any of these lying around, you can try it in those, or really any pen that has a removable nib and feed that has, especially if it's a cartridge converter and you can flush it with a bulb syringe, you're going to be in pretty good shape. And then when it comes time to clean that out, I find that using a pen flush really does help to move that shimmertastic, you know, shimmeriness out of there, and that can be a good feature for you. Jacob B on Facebook says, and I'm sorry some of these questions are so long today, Brian, I'm on a college kid budget and looking to get one of each style of pen, regular nib, italic, and flex. I have a Pilot Metropolitan and a Jinhao 750 with a Goulet 1.1 stub. I just need a flex pen. I've been looking at the Noodler's Ahab, but I've heard a lot of back and forth on if the Ahab is worth it, and if you can't afford to tinker with it. What's your opinion, and in the experiences you've had, are the people having problems getting the pen to write a vocal minority, or is it really that common? Okay, I probably could have cut that question down a little bit, but the heart of what you're saying here in this question is, the people that are having troubles with Ahab, is that the norm or is that a vocal minority? In my opinion, it is, and this is going to sound probably like heresy to some of you who have had bad experiences with the Ahab, but I would say it's really more of the vocal minority. Now, it's not an insignificant minority, because the pen is designed to be tinkered with. So that was something that Nathan felt was kind of important. He wanted you to be able to swap nibs on it. He wanted to be able to mess around and take it apart and heat set the feed and all that kind of stuff. So with great power comes great responsibility. So, you know, the more you allow a pen to be tinkered with, the more you're somewhat requiring it to be tinkered with in some situations. Now, because the pen is so inexpensive, relatively speaking, especially for a flex pen, it does make the pen more accessible to people who maybe are not as experienced or invested into the fountain pen craft, or especially, you know, dealing with flex pens. So I think that some of the people that have difficulty with the pen, it's maybe a matter of expectations, and then it doesn't meet their expectations for how much they're having to kind of get used to the pen or tinker with it or whatever. And then they feel somehow betrayed or something like that, so they become very vocal about it. I will say that there are a significant number of people that have talked about having troubles with it and stuff like that, but it's, as it is with anything on the internet, you know, look at Yelp reviews as a perfect example. People that stay at a hotel and have a very acceptable or even a good experience usually don't go out of their way to say so on a review site. But if somebody has a bad experience, they are, I think it's something like 29 times more likely to say something bad than someone is to say something good. I don't know, there's probably different statistics out there, but that's the latest I've heard. So you're much more likely to hear about somebody's bad experience than you are about somebody's good experience related to, you know, a product review. I think that would fit in there along with like Yelp reviews or any type of review, really. So to get a lot of good feedback and positive reviews, you know, is tough. It's kind of fighting against human nature a little bit. You know, it's sort of like if you're driving to work, how many times do you say, wow, I was driving to work and that person in front of me really used their turn signal appropriately and made the turn in an acceptable manner. Like, you don't even think about that, but if somebody cuts you off and doesn't use their turn signal, you're gonna be talking about that person and cursing them for all day. You know, so it's just kind of how it is. So I think that the tendency for people to talk more about their bad experiences definitely influences the perception of pens like the Ahab, but in general, the Ahab I found to be one of the more reliable of the Noodler's pens, and for the cost of the pen and what's involved and the number of pens that I've messed around with, even ones that I've gotten back from people saying they've had issues with it, and I use it and I'm like, this is actually not that bad. You know, there are definitely some legitimate issues that happen. There's manufacturing defects. Noodler's is a small manufacturer. There's some QC issues that slip through more there than with a, you know, brand like Lamy or Pilot or something like that. It's definitely, there's more, you know, complaints and stuff that we hear about that, but it's not by any means a majority. I mean, we're talking about like a small percentage of all the Ahabs that leave our store here that we might ever hear anything about. Now, there could be other people that are having experiences that don't let us know, sure. That could happen, but we also usually hear about things pretty good. You know, but the tough thing is, it's like, what's your alternative? I mean, if you're not getting into something like a Noodler's Ahab, you know, you can get into dip pens, which is a whole different thing, but fountain pens, it's like, it's that, or you go vintage or get something like a Pilot Falcon, which is gonna be $140 or up. So it's kind of like, for the amount that you're investing into it, it's worth giving it a shot. And even if you don't particularly like the pen, you can still practice enough with it to know if flex writing is really for you or not. So I think that it's worth making the investment to learn and get to experiment a little bit, because the thing is, the honest truth about flex pens is they do take a little more work anyway. It takes more practice, you got to know the pens a little bit more. Just like it's truly like a writing instrument. Any musician who, you know, really practices a lot, they really know their instrument inside and out. They know its intricacies, they know its quirks, they usually get into being able to repair and do some stuff on their instrument. It's just kind of how it goes, you know. It's like a guitar player. If they bought a guitar and said, I don't ever want to have to change the strings, well, that's not really how it works, you know. That's part of learning how to play that guitar, is knowing the strings, and the more you know about your instrument, the better you're going to be able to play it. It's really kind of the same thing, especially with some of what I would consider like these high performance pens that we're talking about, like flex pens and things like that, that we expect a different type of performance than just does it write consistently. It has to, you know, it's more demanding on the pen of what we're asking it to do when we're talking about flex. So it's something that you have to really kind of know what you're getting into. But it's a great place to experiment and play around with. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand with that. I think there's some legitimacy to it for sure, but it is a little blown out of proportion. All right, this is from CBR Vonner on Instagram. Which fountain pen under $100 is the most well-rounded for daily use for writing and pseudo calligraphy? So interesting. I get asked a lot of time, like, what's the best pen for a certain price point and stuff like that. Sure, I'm happy to share that all day long, but I like your pseudo calligraphy part because I have some thoughts on that. For me, pseudo calligraphy, I don't know exactly what that means, but for me, what I interpret that to be is I want my handwriting to look fancy, but not have to actually learn calligraphy. And for me, the stub nib is the perfect way to do that. You don't have to, I mean, if all you have to do is write in cursive, or you could write in block print too, honestly. And if you have a stub nib, which is basically a nib that is ground in such a way that your cross stroke is thin and your downstroke is fat. Of course, the bigger the nib that you get, the more drastic that's going to be, but that's the basic concept. So just writing normally, especially if you're writing in cursive with a stub nib, will immediately make your handwriting look better, and it'll look kind of scripty and calligraphy-like without having to change anything about the way you do things. That's part of the reason I love stubs so much, is you don't really have to learn a lot new, but it looks really cool. So the best all-around nib kind of for that is a stub nib in the like 1.1 millimeter range. A 1 millimeter or 1.1, most of them tend to be 1.1. You don't really notice a difference between those two, by the way, but anything in that range, you're going to be pretty good because it's thin enough where you can still write and fit it on kind of normal paper size, normal line width. If you get any bigger than that, you're gonna have to write a lot bigger, and it's gonna be hard to kind of fit it for everyday writing. Then it's really, you're kind of getting into a little more intentional kind of calligraphy. So pens that kind of fit in that range, of course, Lamy Safari or All-Star can definitely fit in there. Not a lot of the pens come with a 1.1 nib on it, so you have to buy one and you can swap it. It's pretty easy. You can use tape, or sometimes I can remove it with my finger. This one is not coming off. And I'm just realizing I have a polished steel nib on my charcoal. I swap my nibs all the time, so that's not the nib that comes on the pen. It's a black nib. But if you get a stub nib, or I think Lamy might even call it an italic, technically same thing for the purpose of this explanation. But it normally comes with a black nib, but their 1.1 only comes in polished steel. That is definitely one route that you can go. You know, Safari is around $30. An extra nib will run you another 13 or so. So it's a bit of investment, but not crazy. Another route you can go is to go with a Jinhao or maybe a Noodler's pen like the Ahab, and then you can replace the nib with a Goulet nib, or some other brand if you want, but the Goulet nibs work pretty well on these. You can just swap it out. It's a number 6 size nib, pretty easy to pull out. You can get a 1.1 Goulet and put it on here. A lot of people like to do that. I hear good feedback all day long about people that have swapped, especially 1.1s actually, into their Jinhaos, and it works really well. And total investment there is about $25. Not too shabby, and that works pretty well for a lot of folks. The nice thing about the Ahab, if you wanted to go that route, is you're getting a flex nib. So you can experiment for doing kind of this pseudo calligraphy. If you wanted a different type of experience, you could not write with a lot of pressure and get kind of a normal everyday writing with the Ahab. You could flex it out and get some calligraphy that way, writing with flex, which takes a little more practice than the stub, but that's okay. Or you could get a Goulet nib and fit it on your Ahab, and then really have a lot of options. Total investment there is going to be about $40. So it's really not too bad either. That's about what the Safari is going to cost you. So you got a bunch of options here. I wanted to give you some. I would definitely recommend you check out, I have a couple of videos, 101 videos on flex nibs and stub nibs separately. I talk about both in both videos, but you can learn a lot about both of those two types of pens in the 101 videos that I have on those. So I highly recommend you check those out. Cool. This question is from Anetti1984 on Instagram. Is there a less expensive capless fountain pen than the Pilot Vanishing Point? So you probably are very, very aware of this pen at this point because I talk about it a lot. In fact, I'm almost like every Q&A, I'm like, okay, I should just keep a Jinhao, a Safari, Metropolitan, and a Vanishing Point like on my desk for every Q&A, and an Ahab, so it seems, because I've really been talking about them a lot. But it's really a unique pen in the fountain pen world. They originally called it the capless, back when it was the Namiki capless, but now it's the Pilot Vanishing Point, which similar concept though. It's a click retractable fountain pen, which is very uncommon, very, very uncommon. And it's actually an incredibly difficult design. And I've been told by Pilot that Chinese like knockoff companies have tried to copy the design of the Vanishing Point, and they haven't been able to do it yet. So it's pretty unique design, and no, the short answer to your question is there is not a less expensive click retractable fountain pen that I'm aware of out there than the Vanishing Point. And it works really well, it writes great, has a fantastic reputation. So yes, if you could get one cheaper, that would be great. The only one ever that's a little cheaper that I've ever heard of is in Japan. They have a version of the Vanishing Point that has a steel nib instead of a gold nib, and it's cheaper, but they don't offer that in the US. But other than that, there's no other company that makes one that is less expensive. There's a Decimo, which is a little bit thinner, similar concepts, use the same nib and everything. That might be a couple of bucks cheaper, but there's nothing else that I'm aware of. So, sorry, maybe not the answer you're looking for, but this really is kind of the gold standard, to do a play on words there for the nib. All right, this question is from This One Designs on Instagram. I design for a living. Does using a fountain pen with a straight edge or ruler affect tine alignment? Or is there a correct way to use a fountain pen with a ruler to get straight architectural lines? This is good. I don't know that I've been asked this question specifically, or maybe I haven't in a very long time for Q&A. I know I've never taken it before. But I would caution you a little bit about doing that, really just because when you're talking about using a straight edge, specifically I'm thinking like it's probably going to be some kind of aluminum or steel or something like that. It's probably going to be something metal. Maybe not. Maybe sometimes it's that like Lexan type plastic, but if you're using something technical, I'm thinking it's probably like a very straight aluminum thing. And if you're taking that nib and you are pressing it, rather forcefully up against that straight edge and drawing it over and over and over and over again, I can't imagine in the long term it's going to be really great for that pen. So if you're going to do that, I would say stick to a less expensive pen for one. But they actually make technical drawing pens, which are not super popular today just because pens in general have changed quite a bit. A lot of technical drawing stuff is now done on computers and stuff like that, so physical doing it with pens is not as popular as it was back in the 70s and 80s, right, as you would probably imagine. But there's a pen that I have never actually used myself, but I've heard a lot of other people using, called rapidograph pens. If that's even how you say it properly, I'm not actually sure. But they work similarly to fountain pens. Now the ink I understand is a little bit different. It's a little thicker. It's more like a calligraphy ink. Then there's special like technical drawing ink that's light fast and things like that. They're actually probably a little even better for that purpose than typical fountain pen ink. So that's what you use in those pens, and it's kind of more like a felt tip pen, or maybe like a roller ball that has a fountain pen feed mechanism in it that uses this like India ink of sorts, and that is what people use for the technical drawings. And that's it doesn't use a nib per se, but it uses a writing tip, and that's how you use it. So I imagine that might be made to withstand doing the drawings a little bit more than just a typical fountain pen nib. But honestly, the fountain pen nibs are pretty tough. As long as you're not really wrenching into it, it would definitely work for that purpose. I think you just might, over a number of years, need to replace those nibs or the pen altogether if it's really wearing down on it. I could imagine that being the case. So if you wanted to go ahead and use a fountain pen for that purpose, I think that's okay as long as you understand what it is that you're doing. I do think the Pilot Metropolitan would be a really good pen for that purpose, especially the fine nib, because it gets pretty precise. And I think it would work really well, and it's not a huge investment either. So that's one that I would definitely recommend that you try out. I think that could work pretty well. The Lamy also might not be a terrible one because you can get a replacement nib for it. Replacement nib costs almost as much as a Metropolitan, but that's a whole other thing. I feel like an extra fine Safari could work pretty well for that purpose as well. So I think that would pretty much do it, but really that rapidograph pen from Koh-i-Noor I think is like the brand that makes them most universally today. But check that out. And I think that might be able to be a good solution for you if you don't want to go the fountain pen route. All right, this question is from ArchImage on Twitter. What's more important, having one good pen with multiple inks or having multiple pens with one good ink? Nice little philosophical question here. I say, why not both, right? But no, seriously, really the answer is kind of both, but I'll explain my logic. When I was just starting out into fountain pens, I personally was more into the ink than the pens. I found greater benefit to using a more limited number of pens and changing it up and using all different kinds of ink. That to me was much more accessible, you know, and I actually quickly stumbled upon a pen that I really liked using back in the day, which was the Pelican Script, which is a pen that we carried for a while and we don't anymore because it wasn't popular, but I really enjoyed it. It's a stub nib pen. It's a long, pointy stub nib pen that looks kind of goofy, but actually I have one over there, but yeah, I'm thinking, should I show it? All right, fine. I know, I'm trying not to like wheel out of the frame all the time in these things, but I feel like I'm talking about it enough now where I should probably show it. So I actually have 5 of these things because I bought a bunch when I first started using it, but here's the Pelican Script. You know, it's really kind of like a Lamy Joy type thing. It was pretty inexpensive. I think it was around 15 or 20 bucks. And, you know, it uses standard international cartridges. But the problem is the cartridges don't really stay in there. You can use a converter in here too, but the converter often hangs up in the back of the pen. So when you go to take it off, you have this converter kind of sticking out and it's kind of weird. So it's, you know, in actual functionality, it ended up not being that great in the long term for everybody, but I enjoyed writing with it. So I used the Pelican Script almost exclusively for, you know, probably the first 6 months, maybe 9 months that I was even into the fountain pen hobby. Because actually, a little bit of Goulet history for you if you're not that familiar with it. When I transitioned out of making my own pens, we started carrying ink and paper, but I was only making my own pens. I didn't really know that much about pens. So we didn't retail any commercially made pens for the first year of the Goulet Pen Company. I was making my own pens, but that kind of went on the outs. So there was a period of time for probably about 6 to 9 months where we did not sell any pens. All we sold was ink and paper. But I had my own pens that I was using, of course, and the Script was one of them. So relatively inexpensive pen. I did not have a lot of money at that time. Trying to start a business, had a new baby, mortgage, blah, blah, blah. But I loved using a lot of different types of ink. And I personally found that the ink was really cool. I could change my mood and use a different color of ink. I could get a different writing experience with a different flow, different, you know, kinds of stuff like that. So I really enjoyed in the beginning that process of sticking more to one pen and changing up the inks a lot. Now, 7 years later, I'm actually kind of the opposite. I do enjoy changing inks. I really do. But I'm a lot more into pens now, you know, obviously. Because I talk about them all the time, and there's new pens coming out, and you know, we carry we carry a lot of different brands of fountain pen ink. Not everything. There was a time when it was like any ink that we could get, we would try to carry, and then we'd sell like 2 bottles a year of a certain ink color, and I'm like, okay, we could really get rid of this and no one would even care. So we're a little more, you know, discerning about the ink that we carry on our site these days. So we don't carry everything, but we do carry a lot, and there's just not nearly as much new ink that comes out in general in the whole fountain pen industry as there are new pens that come out. So I think, you know, being a pen person and staying in this hobby for a long time, especially if you're into new like modern stuff like I am, there's a lot more to get excited about on a regular basis with new pens than there is inks. Now, of course, 500 plus ink selection that I have here at Goulet, you could pretty much use a new ink, you know, every week and never use them all. So not never, but it would take you whatever, 10 years. No, yeah, 10 years or so or more if you use a new ink every week. So it's going to take you a while to get through them all. So there's a ton to explore in the ink world, and certainly that's where some people stay. Some people limit their number of pens, hang out and just explore inks like crazy. Other people, I would say those who have been into fountain pens for a while, they kind of stick with the inks that they really like, the ones that are easy to clean and no fuss, and they really like the color and it performs like they want. And they just kind of find a few that work really well in the majority of their pens, and they kind of stick with just a few ink colors, and they change up the pens a lot more. So it's really, there's no wrong approach to doing it. It depends on what it is that excites you more about it, and that may shift over time too, as it has a little bit with me. Now I say that, but I have, I think, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, 100 bottles of ink or something in my personal collection. I haven't counted. I did a Q&A question on that a long time ago, and I was actually shocked at how many bottles of ink I have, because I've just collected a lot that I've kind of forgotten about. But that said, I'm kind of a hoarder of both ink and pens. So really where I have ended up is doing both. But I think that, yeah, I think I've explained it thoroughly. There's no wrong way to go about it, but maybe it tells you a little bit about who you are, about how your approach is towards the whole situation. All right, now let's talk a little bit about ink, shall we? Good segue. Thomas S. on Facebook says, I filled my Lamy Vista with some Quink washable blue, that's a Parker Quink, and vowed to use the pen exclusively until I'd written it dry. It's been almost 3 weeks, and I realize I've not run a pen dry, nor had fewer than 5 inked pens at a time in rotation since the last presidential administration. It's driving me nuts. Plus, it's October, and I have 3 shades of orange and brown just screaming out to me. Should I flush and switch, or stick to my guns? The leaves are turning Noodler's habanero colored as I write. Sounds like you're in an ethical quandary. Not ethical, but whatever. You're in a philosophical quandary here for yourself. Me personally, just flush the ink and use what you want. The amount of ink that you have probably left in that pen is like 1 drop. Like, don't even worry about it. You're probably talking, if you want to get completely economical here, you have probably 4 cents worth of ink left in your pen that you're hanging on to and not using. A beautiful orange that's going to match your leaves outside and make you feel great. Just clean and flush the dang pens. Don't even think twice about it. That's where I'm coming from. Life is too short to use an ink in your pen that doesn't make you happy in that moment, honestly. And if it's really like, if you just filled it and you know you have a half a converter's worth back in there, you can dump it back in the bottle if that would really make you feel better. But even that amount of ink is not that significant if you really think of it. And Quink is an inexpensive ink anyway. It's really not that much. So just dump the stuff, man. Come on, I encourage you, I invite you, and I say I completely absolve you of any feelings of guilt from not using every last drop of ink out of your pen. Just go ahead and change it. Life is too short. That's really just where I stand. All right, Lisa V on Facebook. Last week's question about ink storage got me thinking. I have typically stored my ink in the bathroom, which is also where I clean and fill the pens at home. I'm very messy, thus the bathroom seems the safest bet. You're probably not alone in that. Not where I personally store it, but I'm sure you're not alone. But I got to thinking that with the humidity and temperature fluctuations in the bathroom, maybe this isn't very bright. With bathrooms' tendency towards mildew, etc., maybe even filling and cleaning pens there isn't the best idea. That said, as far as I can tell, I've never had any ink go funky on me. The Noodler's Borealis Black has a tang, but seems that it always has had. Yeah, definitely some Noodler's inks. Borealis Black would fit in this group. Has a bit of a scent to it on its own, but really there's a pretty distinctive smell when an ink has mildew or mold or something like that in it. It's going to smell like an old wet sock. Like, it's going to smell just. It's different than smelling a little bit chemically or having a little bit of a oh, that smells, really smells different kind of thing. No, this is going to smell like funk, like just, it's going to be unmistakable when you go to smell a bottle of ink that has mold in it. It's just going to be completely wretched and you're not going to be able to deal with it. So I don't think you're in that situation that you need to worry about. So this is the kind of thing, like, there's definitely, I need to lace out a lot of disclaimers answering this question. There's a lot of best practices out there that any reputable like pen manufacturer, ink manufacturer is going to say, and they're definitely not going to say, yes, you should store your ink in your bathroom with lots of mildew. No one in the right mind is going to say you should do that. I'm not going to say, no, maybe I'm not as reputable or as disclaimery as some of these other people in the pen industry, but I would say you can feel free to do what you want. You know, it's your stuff. But definitely I would say probably the bathroom. There is definitely more of a moisture thing going on there. Temperature fluctuations, yes. Is that going to be so much of a problem for your ink storage? I don't really know. I don't really think so, because if you're storing your ink properly, like sealed up, and have it in like the box or something like that, it's not going to really be impacted quite as much. The only thing I can think that maybe is if you're getting some severe temperature fluctuations, that perhaps the cap could loosen up from the bottle a little bit. If the cap material, you know, being that the bottle's usually glass, the cap is usually not, and you may get that the cap could undo itself a little bit, and then you might get some evaporation and stuff going on there. Maybe. I haven't heard of anybody that has directly tied, like, I had moldy ink and it's because it was in my bathroom. I've never heard of that being happening, so it's possible, but not probable, I guess. You're certainly increasing your likelihood of it. You know, so to say like the blanket disclaimer thing, you want to store your ink in a cool, dark, dry place. That's pretty much what every pen person is going to say that you should do. So you're taking a calculated risk by storing it in your bathroom. Do I think it's a great risk? Probably not, but it's something that you should take into consideration when making that decision for yourself. You get what I'm saying? As far as like filling the pen and stuff like that, I will say that your greatest chance of getting contamination into your ink is at the time when you're filling your pen. So to lace more disclaimers here, pretty much every pen maker is going to tell you that when you're cleaning your pen, you should use distilled water. That's what you should do, because that's going to lessen your contaminants. Certainly water that's coming out of your tap is going to have more of a likelihood of having stuff in it than you would microbes and, you know, minerals and stuff like that. So if you want to be super safe about it, use distilled water, and that would cut down on that quite a bit. Then really the only chance for contamination that you're really going to have is when you're actually opening up the ink bottle, and then whatever is in your air in your environment could get into your bottle when you're going to fill it. That's about the thing that you're going to have going on. Now, most ink makers are putting biocides and things like that. Not everyone. You know, J.R. Bond, I know they don't put biocides in there, but other ink companies, like, that's part of the reason you get some funky smells sometimes with some of the inks is some of the biocides. So they know that there's a great risk of things growing in your ink, so they put stuff in it to combat, you know, stuff like that from growing in there. So even if you get a little bit of contamination, usually it's going to be cut out by the biocides that are in there. Again, you're taking a calculated risk, blah, 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 disclaimers everywhere. But this is a judgment call that you're going to have to make. Is it going to severely disrupt your lifestyle and your enjoyment of these things? Is it a massive ink collection? Is it like 2 bottles of ink and you've used it for 5 years and never had a problem? Is it really that big of a deal? Probably not. If you have 80 bottles of ink and you've got $1,000 invested in your ink collection and you're storing it in your bathroom, I would say maybe that's not the place to keep it. You could probably store it somewhere else, because the ramifications, if you had some kind of issue, would be greater. So maybe use your judgment on that one. But I've said enough of like the best practices kind of thing. You should store it not in the bathroom. You should fill it and only use distilled water, and you should, you know, only fill it in a clean room and all this kind of stuff. But in reality, you're gonna have to make your call. I don't hear about mold in pens nearly as much as you would probably think that I would hear about that. It's definitely, there's a possibility of it, but I don't think it's as prominent an issue as maybe it used to be in years past. Probably due to the fact that just the way they make inks today is just not as likely to happen, but you really have to have some pretty extreme things going on to get like a big mold issue going on in your pens. And while it's certainly more likely to happen in your bathroom, I think that if you haven't had an issue this far, I wouldn't get super paranoid about it. But again, don't blame me for it if you do have it, because the fact that I said that, you're probably now going to have an issue with it. Okay. All right, I got a business question and then a personal question, and that'll take us home for today. All right, this business question is from Amy Woods on YouTube. Amy says, are you ever going to reduce the international shipping price to Australia? I'd love to support you guys more than I do, but the shipping is so expensive. On top of conversion, it gets almost impossible. So I used to hear about this a lot more before we offered FedEx. So with US Postal Service, we offer USPS and FedEx. And there's different, grades of shipping with those two carriers. It used to be only USPS, and the shipping used to be a lot more affordable for international. Of course, being the world that it is today, everything is going up in price for all the time, always, right? So I have definitely seen a huge trend in increase in international shipping prices, especially on lower price things. That's part of the reason that our ink drop program died, is because our shipping cost, even domestically, more than doubled on our smaller packages like ink drop, and it just killed all our margin on ink drop. So it became an unprofitable program. And if we raised it up, it would be uneconomical. So that was a ramification that happened that affected a lot of people internationally, for sure, especially on lower weight packages. I'm talking like under a pound, even under 2 pounds. The incremental cost of those lower weight packages has more than doubled in the last couple of years. I mean, we underwent a huge price increase a couple of years ago, where it was like in 1 month the prices doubled for international packages, like under half a pound or under a pound, and it was significant. That's just a move that the post office kind of had to make, I guess, or chose to make. For higher weight packages, it hasn't been affected quite as much. It's definitely still had an increase in recent years, but it's really been on those lower weight packages. So I end up hearing a lot of feedback like yours, where I want to order more or more often or whatever, but it's so expensive I can't do it. Now, to complicate it even more, not talking specifically about Australia, it's definitely every country has their own thresholds for customs fees and exchange rates and all this kind of stuff. Every country has it. They're always different, and they have different thresholds that may or may not be published. So it's really impossible for us to say with any great degree of predictability what customs fees are going to be to any one country, let alone all of them. So that gets pretty frustrating. I fully understand that. And every country is different. For example, Brazil, their customs fees are about 100% of whatever it is that you bought. Like, they just don't want people importing stuff. So it takes, I'm not joking, I've had packages take 5 months to get delivered to Brazil. 5 months to get delivered. And we did all the information, we did everything right. It just got held up that long. I've had other things, other countries will flag any type of ink that's done there. They flag it and say that it has to be tested and all this kind of stuff, and it takes months and holds it up like crazy. It's just, that doesn't happen a lot. Mexico, I know, is not great when it comes to ink. Brazil, their customs fees are very expensive. Chile also. Argentina, I know, are some of the higher ones. A lot of countries in South America, which is, we don't do a lot of business at all in South America because their customs and import fees are so high, it completely makes it uneconomical. That's a lot of why in those countries you don't see a lot of brands available down there either, because they have the customs import fees, not just at the individual level where you're purchasing, but it's at the country, importing and exporting regulations and stuff. Like, they can't set up retailerships in those countries because the fees are so high. I hear about, countries, I know Australia, a lot of the products that we offer here are either not as available in Australia, or the prices are a lot higher because of import customs facts and stuff like that. So it gets pretty tough. So, the reason the shipping cost is higher is because those are real costs, and shipping is not a profit center for us. It's something that we have to manage as best we can, because the prices are always shifting, and it does vary a lot based on the weight. So I can say, if you are looking to place orders internationally to Australia or anywhere really from the US, us specifically, if you place larger, less frequent orders, it's going to help out your shipping costs drastically. Now, the thing about the whole customs fees and where I was going on that tangent is sometimes you can hit thresholds of price points where they'll zap you with customs fees at a certain level. So it's kind of like a catch-22 a little bit. Like, if you place smaller orders to try to avoid the customs fees, you're going to pay more in shipping from us. Whereas if you order from us higher dollar amounts, your shipping cost is going to be lower, but your country's going to zap you on customs fees. So it's almost like you can't win. And it's like, that's really frustrating. I totally understand that. But ultimately, it boils down to the economic strategy of the various countries which you're transacting. Your country and the import fees our country and shipping costs and how much, it's like why do you see so much cheap stuff coming out of China? It's because the Chinese government subsidizes a lot of that because they want to do a lot of export, whereas in the US, they don't want to do as much, so they don't subsidize a lot of that, So if they wanted to have a lot of international trade exporting out of the US, the government would have heavy subsidies for shipping costs so that it costs almost nothing to ship out of there, and they would make it super easy, and then everybody across the world would buy our stuff. But that's not necessarily the case. So, and depending on a zillion different factors of things that I'm super getting outside of my area of expertise and even broaching the subject, there's a lot of factors that go into it, and the costs that we have are as low as we've been able to find to get them and still maintain a healthy, profitable company. So that's really kind of where we're at. So the fact that we have different shipping options with USPS and now FedEx, that's the best that we've been able to find. So placing larger, less frequent orders, and then I find that the best option is to go with FedEx internationally. Now it's going to vary depending on your country, and we have different rates that you can calculate based on your situation. But for the speed of the shipping, for the tracking, and for what you're getting for that shipping, and sometimes just the overall cost is actually cheaper with FedEx. So I find internationally FedEx to be a better option, at least from what we've been able to muster up. So that's where I'll kind of leave off with that. But really good question. I get asked that a lot. All right, and the last one, this is a kind of a personal question, but also kind of very pen related. Not entirely personal, but my personal life is basically his pens. AGS23 on Instagram says, do you recommend having a strategy to collecting fountain pens? So, great question. And before I answer it, I'm going to take a sip of water because I've really been talking a lot this Q&A. As I do with everyone, I guess, really. So by its definition, if you're talking about collecting, that is with a strategy. So you kind of answered your own question a little bit. You cannot collect fountain pens without a strategy. And I say that because it's really kind of common term, maybe not that common, but there is terminology in the fountain pen world of collectors versus what kind of I more am is acquirers. So collecting really is you are buying fountain pens with a specific strategy in mind. Now there's a lot of different strategies to have, but acquiring is, oh, I like this pen. Oh, I like that pen. Oh, I like this one. Oh, look at that, I've got a collection. That's kind of what I've done. And now it's kind of and I have like sub collections within my general acquisition, but it's more, the acquisition is more kind of falling backwards into it and saying, yeah, I guess once you have 40 pens, you kind of are a collector, aren't you? That's very different from, I love the Lamy Safari and I'm going to collect every color that comes out and I'm going to have all of them. Or I really love pens with a Urushi finish. I'm only going to buy pens with a Urushi finish. Or I love the number 18, and any pen that comes out with a limited edition number 18, I'm going to buy it. That is collecting. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about collecting. Some ones that I thought of kind of off the top of my head here. You can collect by brand, certainly. I love Visconti. I want every single Visconti. You might go broke, but you could do that. Model. I want every single Lamy Safari. Boom, that's model. Material, Urushi, Rodin, Ebonite, celluloid. You can certainly stick to a certain material. That's definitely a very viable way. Color, absolutely. Blue is my favorite color. I fall backwards into collecting a lot of blue pens. I don't have much of a strategy to it, but you can certainly do that. Country of origin. Some people really love Japanese pens or Italian pens. And there's other things like history or themes that you can get into. Those you tend to find more in some of the higher end pens, the limited edition things, but certainly the whole limited edition numbered, that kind of thing, caters more to people who are more intentionally kind of collecting pens and stuff like that. Also, it could be specific attributes of pens, like type of nib, like flex nib or stub nibs, or filling mechanisms. If you really love vac fillers and you want to get every single vac filler pen out there, or piston fillers, and you can kind of focus in that way. Certain attributes of pens, like if you love pens that are, sparkly, you can get that, or any pen with a unicorn theme, whatever. There's different things along that you could get into. So there's a lot of different approaches that you could take. I consider myself to be an acquirer, because I do not have a specific strategy in mind. Now that said, I have kind of several subcategories of things that I collect, I guess, with very intentional. I kind of fell backwards into collecting Lamis because I was just getting so many of them, and I was like, oh, if I could just go back and get a few historic ones, I would kind of have a full collection of Safaris and All-Stars in studios. So I kind of sought those out and bought them, and now I'm like, oh, okay, I have, with the exception of some like retailer exclusives, if you try to collect every single Lamy Safari out there, you're gonna go broke, because there's some that are like super rare that cost you like $400, and it's just completely ridiculous. But I have, you know, at least, you know, pens that have been kind of launched worldwide. I have, I think, every single one, with the exception of the original, that olive colored one. I don't have that one, but I have, I think, every single other one, and I think I have every single All-Star, and I might have every single studio too. So those I've collected very intentionally, and then I've collected, if you can count this, I've collected every Goulet exclusive thing that we've ever had. So I at least try to keep one of every model, maybe not every single color, because we've done a bunch at this point, but I'm trying to keep one of every exclusive that we've ever done. Even if it's only for exclusive for a period of time or whatever, I'll still try to hang on to it. So that's really been my collecting strategy, but the vast majority of my pens are, you know, oh, this is cool, or I'd really like a model of this pen. What color don't I have? That'd be cool to have a rose gold, you know, like the Lamy Lux came out, and I was like, oh, okay, I don't have every single Lux. Gosh, do I have to keep every single Lux now? It gets expensive. I had originally tried to have one of every color of Noodler's pen, and that got unsustainable very quickly, so I gave up on that. But there was a time when I tried to do that. So yeah, the Lamy Lux, I'm just thinking about that now, like, dang, I don't have every single color of that, but I have like every single color of every other Lamy. Should I have one of every Lux now? Literally, that just popped in my head as I'm recording this video. It's like, crap. That's a lot more pens. Do I really need more? Anyway. Usually pens like that, I wait until they're like discontinued, and I'm like, oh shoot, I do need to get that color, and then I grab it. That's what I've done with most of the Lamis. Anyway, I'm really talking out loud here. So I think that it's whatever makes you happy. You know, the logic behind having a specific, you know, collection strategy. It's certainly like, if there's something that makes you happy, or number 4 is your lucky number and you want to collect every number 4 pen that you can, more power to you. That's really just for you, which really, let's be honest, fountain pens, we do it for us, right? Like, we're not doing it for many other reasons. There could be possibly some return on investment type of strategy that you might have if you say, okay, well, I see this probably more with like Mont Blanc and some of the higher priced, higher end pens, that people collect them really with a strategy in mind for selling them in the future and making money on them. I personally feel like that's not a great reason to collect fountain pens, because like with any niche, it's going to be very difficult to predict what's going to have a good return and what's not. And then really you're getting into, I'm buying an expensive pen that I'm going to stick inside a safety deposit box somewhere and sell in 20 years on the hopes I might make money. That's really not, when I think about it, and I've talked to a lot of manufacturers and stuff like that, there's certainly people that do that, and you know, pen companies like Mont Blanc specifically, they design pens for people to do that, absolutely. But, you know, when I talk to other pens like Namiki, you know, like I've talked to the folks at Pilot USA, and they say things like, you have no idea how much it brings joy and satisfaction to the artisans that are creating these pens. Like, they're spending 4 months on a pen, to know that it's actually getting used and written with and appreciated on a daily basis. That brings more joy to them than somebody stuck in a safety deposit box and is trying to flip it in 20 years, as you would probably guess. So while there's no wrong approach to doing it, I wouldn't encourage someone to get into collecting for the investment aspect of it. I think it's so speculative, and it's going to be difficult with any degree of predictability to say, yes, that's a good approach. That I don't think it's the way to go. Now, if you want to do it that way, and that is the way that you get the most satisfaction in your fountain pen hobby, more power to you. But I don't push that on people as something, if you're like on the fence, oh, should I do that or should I not? No, don't. Use the pens, enjoy them. But I'm super biased here. I mean, I have like, you know, Visconti Opera Masters and stuff that I get the pen and I'm like, I'll keep the box and I'll keep all the original stuff, and I'm like, yeah, let me ink that thing up. Like, yeah, I'm going to use that sucker. You know, that's just, I enjoy that so much more than, you know, getting really hung up on the collectability aspect of things. But it's really up to you, but that's my approach to it. So do whatever makes you happy. All right, so question of the week for me this week is going to tag right on to the end of this question. What's your strategy, if any, to your pen collection? I'd be very curious to know what's your approach that you've taken. And if you want to give any details, like how many pens you have and how long you've been into it, that's great too. Love some context there, but I'm very curious to hear if you have any strategy whatsoever and what that is. That's all I got for this week. Be sure to visit gouletpens.com and check out any of the pens that I've talked about here today. Be sure to stay safe if you are on the East Coast. Bunker down, you know, enjoy your cans of tuna and things like that. Hopefully you're okay. I'm thinking and praying for everybody that's getting hit, especially at this point. It's already run through Haiti and the Caribbean, and man, they got hit really, really hard. Actually, our church that we go to has a sister church in Haiti, and I've undoubtedly, as soon as they're going to be running some relief things, and Rachel and I are already talking about, like, all right, how much can we give to help our sister church, because it's just, they're getting decimated. So keep them in your thoughts and prayers. Appreciate that, and for everybody else on the East Coast. But that's all I got for this week. I hope you have a good rest of your weekend, a good week. Appreciate you tuning in, as always. Thanks so much, and right on.